This is The Choice with John Geer and Jon Meacham. And we actually have a very special guest, Jonathan Martin from Politico. And I'm going to turn it over to my friend Jon Meacham to lead this conversation.
It's the John's Caucus today.
It is. Well, Jonathan Martin,
Yes, sir.
The pride of Hampton City.
Yes, that hotbed of social rest.
It is.
Exactly.
It is. Longtime Politico foundling.
Yes.
And then
Timesman, yeah.
diaspora to the New York Times. And then came home like the prodigal. And they're still killing the fatted calf. Good friend of Vanderbilt's, very generous with his time and his expertise, and we are always grateful. All right, you've been out there.
Yes.
Tell us what you're feeling.
Well, good to be back at Vandy. I think that we're in for a nip and tuck race till the very end. There's this compulsion to want to know what's going to happen in the election. All of us feel, which is understandable, but it's a race that is so close in a country that's so evenly divided that I just don't think we're going to have a great sense for things up to Election Day. And frankly, I don't think we're going to have a result on Election night. Yeah. Keep in mind, some of these states, including Pennsylvania, cannot start counting their ballots, even those that have already been sent in, until the polls close on Election night. So this could take a while.
So you generously came to our elections class, and you made a very good point, words I don't often say in that order to
Thank you.
About deepening and
Broadening. Yeah.
Lay that out for our folks.
Sure. So the two candidates have two very different theories of the case when it comes to winning the election. The candidates that we grew up covering, that we've known over the years, wanted to do two things. Like most every candidate, they wanted to both mobilize their supporters and persuade their skeptics. Every campaign wanted to do mobilization and persuasion. That was the key to a good campaign. You had to do both things. Well, Trump has sort of defied that in all three of his campaigns. Trump really doesn't do persuasion. He's a mobilizer. He just wants to drive out more like-minded people who, if they vote at all, they're going to vote for him. But the question is, do they vote, period? It's not do they vote for he or the other person. So Trump is a deepener. Trump wants to deepen his pre-existing coalition. It's people that already like him or could like him. It's nobody on the fence. And the best evidence of this is look at who Trump rolls out as part of his coalition. It's Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., people who appeal to the disaffected, frankly, the marginalized, who are more apt to be pro-Trump or at least kind of Trumpy adjacent, right? Can they find him more people who are unlikely voters or sort of unreliable voters? At the same time, Harris is running a much more conventional campaign that likes of which we've seen for years. She wants to mobilize and persuade. She's a broadener. She wants to broaden her coalition by bringing in people who otherwise would be skeptical of her and who may have never voted for a Democrat before. Look no further than her post-Labor Day marquee endorsements, Dick and Liz Cheney, which is done to signal to independents and Republicans, the water is warm, come on in, you can do this, we are too. And so two very different bets about how to win an election in the year 2024. I'm not judging either approach. I think either of them could have their merits, especially in a polarized country, but they're very different bets, and we're going to know which one pans out.
So you've spent time in recent weeks with Liz Cheney.
Yes.
And with Bill Clinton.
Yes.
So
they're very similar, John,
They are.
Yeah.
They are. But compare and contrast as political actors, political athletes.
Oh, great question. I mean, Clinton is a tactile. He's at the rope line. He's carrying on. He's telling stories. The staff's having to grab him by the scruff of his neck and tell him it's time to go. Hold on. These folks have family in Arkansas, and we were just talking about Marion Barry and the Gillette Coon supper. She actually married Marion's sister. And we were just talking about that one time with Dale Bumpers and I. We flew the plane and we almost crashed. Actually, I'm not making any of that up. Marion Barry, the Arkansas congressman, his sister's, his wife's sister was in fact there at this rally in North Carolina that I was at. So Clinton's old school. He's a touchy-feely, tactile politician. He wants to work the rope line. He wants to connect. He's in the pulpit of the black church. He's preaching. He's citing verse. He is like classic old school Southern Democrat retail politician. Liz Cheney is somebody who's much more of a policy-oriented person, somebody who I think is more lawyerly, you could say, and somebody who is now single-minded in her mission to stop Trump, and somebody who was focused entirely on making the case about stopping Trump, and somebody who is convinced Trump's a threat to American democracy. And what's interesting about Liz Cheney is she doesn't know Kamala Harris that well. So like watching her on stage, like I did in Wisconsin with Kamala Harris, they're sitting side by side, kind of this Oprah style set, and they're going back and forth, but there's no obvious bond there or connection. They're making it up as they go, and it's not bad, it's not awkward, but it's just not it's not a warm thing because their politics are very different. It was interesting. Harris was asked about abortion during the event that I was at, and Cheney says, I'm pro-life, and I was like, oh, this is going to get interesting. But instead of making the case for her side of that issue, she then actually sounded like more of a Democrat, saying, but even I'm concerned about post-Roe, some of these states and the laws that are making it difficult to get health care. And that to me was telling, which told me that Liz Cheney is on more of a journey, shall we say, in her own politics that's bigger than just Trump,
So here's someone on the ground. So Kamala Harris is all of a sudden the nominee. She basically has been in that position for 3 months.
Yeah.
And normally, and someone like Trump, who's run 2 other prior times, a third time, he's kind of knows the routine.
Yeah.
He's campaigned, but she's had to condense a huge amount of learning, so to speak, in a very short period of time, where Barack Obama, the master speaker, was very bad when he first started, wasn't very good, but he got better and better.
Yes.
Had a learning curve, a very positive learning curve.
Had a 50-state primary, John, which helped him too.
Exactly.
Right?
And so he had that ability to sharpen his message, his ability to deliver. What have you seen on the ground as far as Harris's ability to be a better candidate over the last three months? It's a in some sense, she was obviously thrown to the
She was shot out of a cannon, and to her great credit, she had a fantastic convention and delivered a superb debate performance. And guys, the reason why her campaign was so eager for a second debate, I remember a couple of weeks ago talking to somebody in her campaign, and they were quizzing me. So do you think he'll do it? Because they really wanted to know if Trump would give in. Because they know that her strength is as a prosecutor. She preps for 10 days. They give her a fat binder full of tabs, and boy, she delivers her lines and hits her marks. That's her strength. I've known her for over a decade. She's really talented in that sense, but she's not as talented in the way that Bill Clinton and Barack Obama are, because they're generational talents, and they have an instinctual talent for politics, especially off the cuff. And she is not as great as an extemporaneous figure. She doesn't have that. And I've been thinking about this a lot. I think part of the issue, guys, is that she just has not lived in the political world of a Clinton or an Obama or certainly a Biden. Think about all the campaigns they've been through, the states they've campaigned in, the world travel they've done, the leaders they've known. These folks have a context and a background and a feel for politics and government and the connection of the two that is so deep that it gives them a level of authority. This is new for her. She's opening a binder and finding out about Grand Rapids, Michigan for the first time, right? She just hasn't been there. It's not a knock on her, but like she was a brief candidate for president in 19, put on the ticket in 20 during COVID for 3 months, and then was VP, but fairly limited role as VP, if we're being totally candid. And so if you drop her in a Wisconsin or in Arizona, what she knows about those places is largely what she's been briefed on, right? And again, no fault of hers, but that's just different from a lot of our politicians who would know the 5 people in each of those states to call. They would know the backstory, the factions, the relationships, the rivalries,
but
all of that. Right?
But Obama 08 didn't have that.
Well, but he had a 50-state primary that got him got his feet wet in all of those states that she never had. That primary was so helpful to Obama. John, to your point about making him a better candidate, but I think also in terms of like giving him a primer of the country and the country's politics, that he had gone through every state and to learn stuff,
Do you think she's gotten better as a candidate? I mean, if you think about in 08, let's say if we have a measure of candidate quality, Clinton was above Obama.
Yes.
and Hillary Clinton's slope was pretty flat.
Yes.
It just didn't grow.
Yes.
But Obama's was steep
Oh,
and
my
positive
gosh.
and passed her.
Yeah,
But
I think
that's-
her.
his
I think her
hair's gotten
challenge. I
better.
think her challenge is that she's just so much better when she's prepped. And it's not just the teleprompter. That's not fair. It's prep, right? Because she didn't have a teleprompter that first debate, but she's just confident and authoritative because she comes in prepped. I think when she's standing up there at a CNN town hall with Anderson Cooper, and he asks her biggest mistake, she's not as strong because she doesn't have an obvious answer to deliver. So I think that she's gotten better than certainly the candidate she was in 19 and 20. And is more confident now than she was as VP, but she just doesn't have the kind of ease when she's off the cuff, And I think this has been the big challenge for the final stretch of the campaign is they've been trying to find her big moments to break through, and they're still looking for one,
Do you think she would have won a full Democratic primary?
When did we start the primary? When does the clock start here?
Fall of 23.
I think it's a competitive race, and I think the combination of Biden probably helping her out and being a sitting VP is enough to get her the nomination. But I think it would have taken a lot of work, and I think it would not have come easy. Yeah. And I'm not sure it's guaranteed, but I think she probably. I just think structurally, Democrats have become such a top-down, command and control, hierarchical party. We learned this over the summer. They just want to win elections, and they don't like internal fighting and wars. They just want to focus on Trump. And so she might have emerged just because she has structural advantages, but it would have taken more work, I think. Here's what I wonder about, speaking of counterfactuals, John. Let's say that Biden has that debate June 27th. By that weekend, he bows to the party. He drops out of the race that Sunday after the debate. And so it's not even July yet. Harris immediately gets in the race. But is there a fight over the summer? And would she have had a real challenge from somebody then? I think Biden holding out for a month does her a huge favor. Because by the time he drops out, the party is so desperate to focus on Trump again that they just say, forget the primary. Let's just make the best of Kamala, right? But I do wonder, is there a contest if Biden drops out immediately?
Well, the question is, and we all lived through this, I always knew from the study of history the gap between what people say publicly and what they actually do.
Isn't that funny?
I know it's crazy, but the notion that the question is who would have taken on a woman of color and a sitting vice president.
I know.
And I just don't know. I don't know if the 3 weeks made a difference. Yeah. I don't know.
They were, well, what's for sure is that there was no appetite for a primary by the time Biden dropped out.
Right.
Zero.
So would
Zero.
Biden have endorsed her after that?
That's a good question, John.
Because if he doesn't, then the game changes.
Does
But
Biden
if he
deliver?
did,
That's a good
then I don't
question.
think the 3 weeks matters very much.
Does Biden deliver the immediate endorsement? Do the Clintons then follow up with the endorsement? And do Obama and Pelosi eventually finally get to an endorsement too? And they were kind of bringing up the rear there, weren't they, on the old Kamala endorsement? Well, it's Monday night. See what time is it? Let's see if the Obama things come through yet. Waiting. Yeah.
Talk a little bit, if you would, about J.D. Vance and Walz. I'll just give everybody my opinion. I thought for a long time that Trumpism was probably not a transferable account. Yeah. And then the debate with Walz. Yeah. And I thought, this is a pretty skillful, that Vance was a pretty skillful.
He's a better demagogue.
Yeah. And he was dishonest and he lied. I say that not as a partisan, but he said fundamentally things that were not true. And he did it so smoothly that it was unsettling.
It's a better version of Trumpism. It's also a more principled version of Trump. Trump has impulses. Trump broadly is like a nationalist and isolationist, but it's not that well thought out, right? It's America's getting our lunch eaten, and there was the Japanese and the Koreans in the 80s. They're dumping these Datsuns here. And he's now updated it for, other countries, but it's the same kind of impulse. Vance can put meat on the bones and can actually walk through his version of populism and nationalism, right? He actually believes it. Or at least he does in this current iteration.
Well,
a guy who just turned 40, he's lived a lot of lives, right?
Exactly.
And he's sort of he strikes me as somebody who's, speaking of being on sort of a search for their identity, on a journey. He's a guy on a journey too. It seems like trying to figure out where he is. He seems to have settled on kind of pure Trumpism. And boy, give him credit for sheer political chutzpah. Here's a guy who, basically executed a 2+ year campaign to win over Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr. to get the nomination for Senate, to win a Senate race, then to get picked for VP, and now maybe be the VP. That's a hell of a turnaround for a guy that called Trump Hitler not too long ago, right? So he knows what he's doing, to your point, and he's talented. In terms of his relevance in this race, you guys know this. Everything about politics in the age of Trump is about Trump. And which side are you on? It's black and white, good and evil, light and dark. And so I think he hurts Trump at the margins because my rule of thumb on VPs is that they matter when they hurt. And so I think he hurts because he reinforces a negative about Trump, which is crude and nasty to women. And so, look, if you and I were to walk down West End Avenue right now and talk to the first 10 people about Vance, if anybody knew anything about him at all, it would be cat ladies, right? So he reinforces a negative. I just don't think it matters all that much in the context of a Trump campaign. This is about Trumpism, right? On Walz, she picked him for comfort food. Here's the Minnesota hot dish, don't you know, nice guy walking into the VP's residence, and he just wants to serve and help you and whatever it takes. Madam Vice President, I have no ambitions of my own. And it's this guy's good, man. And she loved it and then Shapiro comes in and is like, so where exactly do you think the curtains are going to be in my office? How's that going to, when I'm looking out at the ellipse, precisely, I'm exaggerating, but she obviously had a better vibe with Walz. But as many Democrats were screaming that day, the vibe doesn't matter if you lose. It doesn't matter if you had a connection with the guy. If you lose, this is a forced marriage, and that's about winning elections. And you guys know this. I mean, if she loses the presidency because she couldn't keep Pennsylvania blue, oh my God, the recriminations.
And you think if she had chosen Shapiro, that Pennsylvania would be in her camp?
John, let's say that she falls 7,000 votes short in Pennsylvania. It's nip and tuck, right? 10,000 votes, right? Yeah. Could he have found you those votes somewhere? I don't know. Maybe not. But
I know what the argument will be. He'll certainly say so.
I know what the argument of Shapiro 28 will be.
Oh yeah,
damn right I could have. I mean, I'm being crass here, but Democrats are looking for the person that can carry Pennsylvania in 28. Well, Josh Shapiro's going to say, I know just the guy, And think about it. By then, he would have won 4 times statewide in that state because he won twice for AG and won twice for governor by then. So he'd be interesting. Fascinating guy. Does a great Obama impression, too, by the way, Josh Shapiro.
Well, that's important.
Yeah.
Well, Jonathan Martin, anything else we have for our guest?
The one thing we talked a litittle bit about in the class, and maybe it'd be useful for the people who make the time to listen to you and I, which I find that those groups troubling, but is you described the class a little bit about the turnout operations, because one of the things we want to stress to anybody who's listening to this is that it is too close. You can wake up in the morning and look at a poll and get nervous about it or excited about it, depending on which side you're on. That's not going to be productive. Don't interpret early vote numbers, because there's a lot of people who are now voting early for Trump as opposed to voting on election day. So there's just no way to interpret it. But if this is a turnout race, kind of compare and contrast the turnout operations of the two.
Well, there's no question that Harris has a superior organization. I mentioned this earlier. Democrats have become the much more organized, cold-eyed, data-driven party, and they know exactly the number of votes, John, that she's got to get in Bay County, Michigan, and what precincts they're in. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, that they're down to the county level. Democrats are good at that stuff. And so if this does come down to a ground game and she can pull this thing out by, a few thousand votes in those 3 states, then they're going to know where to find those votes. The question is it close enough that you can win on the ground, right? It's the old expression in politics, and you guys know this. The ground game works if it's a field goal. If you just need 3 points, then you can get that on the ground. If the game isn't close enough where a field goal matters, it's not going to matter that much. And speaking of field goals, I have to ask, have you guys had the quarterback of Vanderbilt on your show yet? And if not, what are you doing with me on this show today instead of him?
Well, he turned us down.
I'm the backup. backup plan.
He had other important things to do.
I'm the backup QB. He's trying to get a fresh NIL deal. He's trying to get his bag. There you go. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Jonathan Martin of Politico, most importantly, married to the great Betsy Fisher Martin.
If she's listening,
And we're going to send it to her.
we'll find out.
That's right.
Thanks, guys.